Vischer. Welcome back to the show. This is Phil Vischer Podcast. I'm here with Skye Jitani.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Skye. And what'd you do with Christian?
She just disappeared on us.
We're heading into Memorial Day weekend, and Christian had family in town or something, and she couldn't make it. So we got no Christian.
This is, by the way, episode 154.
154. Welcome to episode 154. We've got no Christian, and we've got no guest. It's just Skye and I. So it's a little more intimate.
That's right.
We're going to bring it down.
It's like Charlie Rose, one-on-one.
Yeah, that's what it's like. So I'll bring down the theme song just a notch. Hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear. Hey, it's a podcast. Wait, that's not the right words.
What do you know?
What do you know?
Yeah. Apparently you don't know the words.
I brought it so far down that I couldn't see it. I was lost. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast, and we got video. Hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear. That's where it is. The Phil Vischer Podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Skye, but no Christian too, and we've got no guest, neither here for us nor you. And we're going to keep it a little short because we're tired and it's a holiday weekend. And you know, hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear. The Phil Vischer Podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer Podcast starts right here. I could probably put like kids to sleep if I sing soft enough. Just put your kids next to the radio, and I'll have them asleep in no time.
The child whisperer.
The child whisperer. I'm the puppet whisperer. I can be the child whisperer.
Very good.
Yeah. Oh, I have to announce. We announced this online officially, but we announced what I'm working on. I'm working on a film, a 40-minute space epic. Dun dun dun.
Called? What's it called?
Called Galaxy Buck. Dun dun dun.
Can't wait.
The first episode is Galaxy Buck and the mission to Sector 9. Dun dun dun.
Sector 9. Is that like?
It's not District 9.
And it's not Table 9.
Not Table 9.
Okay.
Sector 9.
But is okay.
Sector 9. Okay, so...
Does that mean sequels will be like Sector 10? Sector
No.
Episode 4, episode 5?
No, the next one I think will be Galaxy Buck and the Wrath of Khan. I think that'll be the next one. Galaxy Buck and the Return of the Jedi.
You could do a parody like the Wrath of something else, like the Wrath of God.
The Wrath of... Galaxy Buck and the Wrath of God.
Yeah, dealing with a sticky issue.
Galaxy Buck and the Temple of...
Solomon.
Galaxy Buck and the Last Crusade.
You could just leave that one.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, that works.
We should take every sequel. Mm-hmm. Galaxy Buck and the Dark Side of the Moon.
Galaxy Buck and the British Empire Strikes Back. Because you're all about empire.
Okay, so here's the premise, and you guys are hearing this for the first time. The premise is, if you look at the 19th century British missions movement, when they sent missionaries all over the world as they colonialized Africa and sent missionaries to Africa, and there were British mission sending agencies. Not government-sponsored, independent British mission-sending agencies like Jonathan Livingston went to Africa, and all those fun guys, Hudson Taylor. My thought was, what if that happened in space? What if, like Star Trek? Take Star Trek, and I think, what if those missions were missionary missions, evangelistic and humanitarian missions, from a galactic mission board?
But didn't Ken Ham already debunk the idea that there's aliens?
Yes.
So there's nobody to go have a mission.
Ken Ham will probably not buy a copy because he's already rejected the premise. So we find new worlds, they're populated, and then we need to send people to tell them about God. And that's what Buck Denver wants to do. So, because the other part of it came about thinking that Buck Denver would actually make a pretty good Captain Kirk in personality. Mm-hmm. You know, he's more confident than he really should be. And
so, have you guys released the trailer yet?
Yes, the teaser trailer. The teaser trailer is online. You can go to galaxybuck.net and you can watch the teaser trailer.
And it's fantastic. I saw it a while ago, but I didn't know it was
Thanks. It's out. You can check it out now. So we're aiming for October for the actual release of the actual first film, 40 minutes of space and puppets and craziness. It's going to be a challenge to get it all.
Well, you're using
done.
It's funny because you're mixing puppets with
Miniatures,
sets
lots of miniatures.
with CGI.
Some CGI, yeah.
Yeah, it's
My initial goal was to move away from CGI and kind of like the artisanal movement where we're crafting our own pickles and beer and whatever.
Right.
Because kids have seen so much CGI, and there's just so much CGI out, and you can do anything in CGI. You watch Ultron and Avengers, and it's just like 100,000 people in one fist fight in New York.
But try doing that all with foam core. Now that's impressive.
Do it with styrofoam, and that's a horse of a different color. So I had the thought, because like with what's in the Bible, most of the key sets, Buck's newsroom is a CGI set, because I had a guy on staff for about a year who was a pretty good CG artist, and so he built all those sets, and then he left and moved to the West Coast and got a job at Microsoft, and then we couldn't really open those sets anymore because none of us were CGI artists, and we didn't.
Got to keep your talent.
Yes, and so that makes it hard to say, we need a different shot of Buck's newsroom, because we didn't really have the ability to do that. And it made me think, well, what if you built the newsroom? What if you built the set like at the scale of a stop motion set? For a stop motion film, they build these cute little miniature sets and they film on them, and they end up looking real. And there's something that's very tactile, something very Etsy, more Etsy than Google.
Okay.
It's
artisanal.
It's artisanal set building.
Right.
Yes, like the Pilgrims.
You know what you should do?
Had to build.
When it's all done.
Yeah.
You could auction off
on Etsy. I would sell them all on eBay.
Portions of the set.
Yeah.
And props and things, because they're littered all over the studio and the office.
They're just littered. They're littered. They're everywhere. Yeah. We could show sets on the show, or show props. We could do that. We could do that. So anyway, stay tuned here, because we will give you sneak peeks and such at the new film. I'm up to my elbows in puppets, and I'm building new puppets, and I'm building them in a different way that I really like, and I'll have to show you some of the new characters at some point.
So stay tuned for more.
Stay tuned for more. GalaxyBuck.net. Go check it out. Okay, Skye, what are you up to? What are you doing this weekend?
Not a lot. We're going to go down to the city this weekend when it's not raining.
Yeah.
And
when's it supposed to rain?
I think Sunday and Monday.
Oh, really?
We're recording this on Friday, May 22nd, for anyone who cares.
If you care.
I think we don't have any big plans. There's no kids' sports this weekend, which is nice.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Memorial Day.
We got some feedback from last week. Remember last week's podcast?
Vaguely.
Yeah. I talked a lot about the Billboard Music Awards.
Right.
And about the biker shooting in Waco.
Yeah, and I recall something about women using adhesive to.
Yeah, and I was noticing. I don't know. Would you say I was lamenting? Because I feel like I was noticing and pointing out.
Well, there was a little bit of a back in my day, that kind of thing.
Because I was noticing how, like, the hosts of the Billboard Music Awards 50 years ago, the guy could have been wearing the exact same outfit. Like, nothing has changed for what guys are supposed to wear. What the girls were wearing is completely different, radically different than 50 years ago. And is that...
But is that just... part of it's just that male fashion tends to be much more stagnant. And women's fashion is always changing.
Yes.
I mean, look at you, for example.
I am stagnant of fashion. Yes, thank you. Me and Steve Jobs and Albert Einstein.
Are you putting yourself in there?
No. I'm just saying, if you notice the people that tend to simplify their wardrobes.
It's because they use their mental powers for other purposes.
Exactly. I'm too busy building puppets.
That's why I shake my head.
I don't think that makes any sense, because you have to do that regularly. You have to.
But I don't have to worry ever again about an old picture of me coming up decades from now going, oh my gosh, look at this
Look
hairstyle.
what my hair was back then. Yeah, I guess you're right.
Free
So
myself
my
from
friend Solomon Parker said, "Are you going to start doing the show from the front porch with a garden hose and a rake to chase the kids off your lawn? This week I heard a lot of old people complaining about how things aren't the same as they used to be. Doesn't seem very helpful or useful."
Seriously, Phil. You're just old.
All right, Solomon Parker, get off my lawn. No, here's my point. I don't even know I'm not exactly sure what my point is. My point is the hypersexualization of women in pop culture.
Yeah.
And the effect it has on our kids.
Okay.
And the next generation of kids, because there's always been some, hypersexualization of women, but we've never had the ability to broadcast it and spread it as massively as we do now.
You just said there's always been a certain hypersexualization of women.
Yes.
Is it that our definition of hypersexualization has just changed? Because I wonder if 50 years ago, if they were watching popular award show and what women were wearing, they would consider that, wow, that's a really sexualized portrayal of women.
50
but
years
we look
ago?
back on it now and go, oh, that's so tame. No one cares.
Well, there was okay, because what?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And it was shocking when women didn't bathe in the beaches, because you didn't swim back then. You didn't go swimming. You went bathing.
Right.
And it was a bathing beach, not a swimming beach.
Okay.
You went bathing at the sea.
That's where public pools came from too. It was originally public baths.
And that's why it's a bathhouse. Right. You got to change in the bathhouse.
Right.
But when women didn't wear a full skirt, when you could actually see legs, or when you could see in the 1920s when women's fashion allowed you to see ankles, that was pretty radical.
Yeah, exactly. And people would have found that scandalous then.
Right, but
so now we just
but
we've raised the bar and the hemline.
But in I'm not talking about butts again. In 1880, there were 300 legal brothels just within the city limits of Chicago. 300 legal brothels.
Okay.
That's how many brothels they had to go to talk about the World's Fair that was coming and the kinds of diseases that might be coming from international guests.
Like bed bugs.
Probably not bed bugs. I don't think bed bugs are classified as a disease.
But they're carried by international traffic.
I guess so.
Okay. So,
yes. So in other words, there's always been the sexualization of women.
You're right.
Always.
Yeah.
But it was held separate from civil society.
Okay. It wasn't.
It wasn't normative.
Frowned upon.
It was frowned upon. It wasn't normative, and it wasn't the way that good people behaved.
Okay.
And that's what we threw it out, that idea, that separation of good and bad sexual behavior. In the academic class, we started to throw it out in the 1920s. That's when people started challenging Victorian norms.
Flappers and all that.
Yeah, in the upper class and in big cities. In the upper class and big cities. Did you watch Downton Abbey?
Yeah.
Okay, what happens? What's the crazy thing that Mary does when they're into the 1920s?
She cuts her hair.
She cuts her hair, and she decides if she's going to get married again, she wants to sleep with the guy first to see how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay, that was pretty radical, but that was the 1920s.
Right.
So that was happening among, kind of the intelligentsia, some of the upper class, the nouveau rich in the 1920s. Okay, it hit the masses in the 1960s.
Right.
That's when the masses said, "Yeah, we're going to reject
But it also was
Victorian social mores."
It also was fueled by the pill, which meant you could
that
be
too.
sexually active and not have to worry about
Yes,
pregnancy.
right.
Yeah.
So, but then the other side of it was this notion that that Christian sexual morals were universally repressive.
Yeah.
And we need to throw them off.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
That happened in the
So,
1960s.
Going back to Solomon's question, how are you not a crotchety old man?
I don't know. Sometimes I think you need to be a crotchety old man.
Well, there you go.
Don't you?
Just
Sometimes it
you
might
don't-
be, but I don't. But here's what I don't see. Here's what I don't see. I don't see it as things used to be so much better,
Right.
and now it's just a steady decline. From
So how is that not what you're saying?
because it's cyclical. They actually, you go back far enough, and they were so much worse because it wasn't safe.
So things decline morally. There's a reformation of some kind
Yes,
of society's
right.
values.
The security that women have in society today, and this is I don't know, you might not agree, is a vestige, and I've talked about this with my Beyonce rant, is a vestige of British Victorian Christian ethics applied to men,
Right.
saying you can control yourself, because women were even in cultures today when women are not allowed to go out in public, unchaperoned. The idea is because they're not safe,
Right.
because men cannot control themselves,
Right.
and you will be attacked. That's what Christianity, in Europe changed was, men, you can control yourself,
Right.
behave like a good Christian gentleman.
Okay. So,
And that allowed women's lib.
all right, we've been down this road before. But let me ask you this. I think the real question is, do you think we are going to, in the future, get to a point of cultural reformation again, where things get out of hand and a new wave of
New wave of
Victorian,
crusaders?
Puritanic. Well, and not just from a Christian point of view, but in general, society goes, we just can't sustain this anymore.
yeah, but
we
today-
need to put clothing back on.
Today, many of the progressive crusaders aren't Christian.
Right.
100 years ago, almost all progressive crusaders were Christian.
Right.
And
But is that going to happen again, do you think?
in some ways it is, but the crusading today in terms of sexuality, well, I mean, there's the marriage equality crusade, so that's one, and I think those people would consider themselves cut from the same cloth as women's right to vote,
Right.
And as any other crusade, except for the Crusades, which of course no one can associate with anymore,
Right.
because that's the only thing we can agree on is truly evil.
Yeah, there's always cultural movements.
There's
happening.
crusaders,
There's
always.
but the
But
question
do you think
is,
a tightening of morality?
well,
is that what
let's
you're
say a move back toward what we would consider
Christian morality?
not just Christian morality, but a more conservative, how do I put it, modesty in public displays of sexuality or that kind of stuff. Is that
right?
And
Well,
you're saying it's cyclical in history. Is it going to happen again? Because I have a pretty good reason why I don't think it will.
ooh, I'm not horribly optimistic that would happen again. Although just for public safety, something has to happen. 20% of girls are being sexually assaulted during their 4 years of college.
Yeah, but the way that most colleges seem to be responding to that is not by saying, "Hey, we need to invoke a dress code,"
No,
or "We need
right.
to make sure that we get alcohol off
we don't
campus,"
we
or
don't
whatever.
we don't know how to respond to it.
Because we don't have any ability to put restrictions anymore.
Right, and because if you tell women to modify their behavior, don't go to frat parties. Now that's victim shaming.
Right, you're blaming victims.
You can't do that. You can tell men to modify your behavior. Try that in the Middle East. Try going to Saudi Arabia and just saying, modify your behavior, men. It's very clear that men don't naturally self-modify behavior. That something huge has to happen to make men modify their behavior, which I would say was Victorian Christianity in Europe. That was so.
But that was an internal transformation of behavior. Where people were being instilled with Christian values and a sense of virtue and other things that led them internally to self-regulate. What we tend to be doing as a society now, because we don't have an understanding of virtue, is we try to do it externally by giving people punitive.
We'll just put all men in jail. Or give them a drug.
Our only answer to everything these days is, well, we need to pass stricter laws that put bigger prohibitions on people for violating these things, because then they won't do it anymore.
Have you watched any of the basketball playoffs?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you seen the ads from NBA stars calling for men to lean in?
Yes.
That's an interesting campaign.
It is. because
it's sexist. I mean, it's saying. It's saying. I think one of the lines in that ad is good things happen when men lean in. Mm-hmm. So right there.
But that's coming from what's her name, Sandberg's book for women. The executive from Facebook.
Yeah.
Sheryl Sandberg.
I don't know that.
She wrote a book called Leaning In. Or Leaning
yeah,
In, right?
yeah,
It's
but
for women and career and family and all
right.
that. But so they're co-opting that idea, but they're applying it to men and.
But it's basically saying that women need you. And it's about domestic. It's their response to domestic violence.
Well, it's partly because it's that, but it's also the overwhelming statistical evidence. And President Obama has been an advocate for this too. That when men disengage from community, when they disengage from their homes, from children, from fatherhood, all kinds of horrible things happen in communities. Your dropout rates go up, drug addiction.
I don't know if it's all that though. I don't know if it's that. I think it's more specifically
about abuse,
domestic abuse among sports stars, and that the sports leagues are trying to respond.
But I wouldn't say that's a sexist thing, because it isn't saying, hey, women need you. It's saying, hey, women need you not to hit them. I think that's a different.
Women need you not to hit them. That's not exactly what they're saying. I never heard those words.
Well, they're not going to say it that way. But essentially, they're saying don't.
But they interview a female athlete. She has a little clip, and she talks about how much it meant to her when her brother picked her as a child for their basketball team.
Okay.
So good things happen when men look out for women.
Okay.
Which just seems to be opposite of the message we've been saying for the last 30 years, that women don't need to be looked out after. They can look out after themselves. Women can take care of themselves.
But don't you think that the message is kind of just telling men to be feminists? Like, give opportunities to women.
But there's
others.
There's a tacit admission that men need to do more to help women have chances, that men have the power.
Well, they have some of it.
Yeah.
I think that's just reality. They're just acknowledging
Saying,
reality.
it's sexist.
Because you can't...
By definition.
If your goal is to have women advance in whatever area you think they need to advance...
Like the area of not getting hit?
Yeah. You can't ignore the fact that 50% of the population is men, and culturally, more than 50% of the power in this culture is held by men. So at some point, you've got to engage them on the
And specifically, much more than 50% of the upper body strength.
Right. Although I was working out yesterday, and there were some women, and they were putting me to shame. I have to confess that. I'm
not saying you're the model for masculine physical.
Come on.
Okay, but so Cedric, my friend Cedric.
You have a friend named Cedric?
I do, Cedric Humstead.
Not the entertainer?
I can never pronounce his last name exactly right. He's actually an illustrator, and he's done some of our character design for us. Okay. Cedric Humstead.
Is it too many consonants? What's the
problem? It's something. I don't know. I have a hard time with it.
Okay.
So he wrote in and said, I agree with you on that whole, the modesty, American Billboard.
Can he illustrate it?
But can he? He could, but his wife doesn't want him to. You could illustrate the modesty side. This is when you fully clothe someone. But he said it's hard to even address, and he sent a news story that talked about, which was interesting, trying to address modesty and having it go horribly wrong. Mom fights back against sexist sixth grade pool party dress code. When Jennifer Smith's son brought home a permission slip for a sixth grade pool party, she was surprised to read a stipulation. All girls must wear a non-white T-shirt over their swimsuit.
That's a little weird.
Being a feminist and seeing things through that filter, I was just kind of enraged by that, Smith told the Huffington Post. And there was another stipulation, no Speedos. So boys could not wear Speedos.
Sixth grade, we're talking.
Yeah, sixth grade.
You couldn't have caught me dead in a Speedo in sixth grade. You can't catch me dead in one now.
Have you ever seen, maybe it was a Greek neighborhood. I don't know. Speedo seems to be a cultural thing.
It's a very European thing.
Yeah. So no Speedos, and I assume that because Speedo also makes one pieces for girls, which are perfectly modest. So I assume it's specific. So there was a stipulation for men.
It's a better hydrodynamic swimming
experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but it also leaves little to the imagination. If you're,
Right.
a sixth grade boy in a Speedo, that's even funny to think about. So here was the reason. So she reached out and said, "What's this rule all about?" The school said there had been inappropriate swimwear at past parties and that they wanted to help students who may be uncomfortable not covering themselves. The T-shirt rule was also an economic consideration. We know that for many of our families, buying an extra one-piece swimsuit for their children would be a luxury they cannot afford. To address the issue of appropriate dress for the swim party, we believed asking for girls to wear T-shirts over their swimsuits was the solution that addressed the issue most sensitively.
So this was a school policy. It wasn't.
It was a school. Yeah, it was a school.
That sounds somewhat reasonable to me.
Mrs. Smith says they're saying that little girls need to be ashamed of their bodies and cover them up.
Well, little boys in Speedos need to be ashamed of their bodies too, apparently.
And why not have a nude swim party if we're really not ashamed of our
That's
bodies?
right.
Why wear swimsuits at all?
At Mrs. Smith's house, they walk around naked all the time.
She says setting one standard for half of the student body only promotes the idea that girls' bodies are naturally shameful. This is Cedric.
Oh.
Cedric is pointing out this is what you're up against.
Yeah.
If you talk about modesty, you're saying I should be ashamed of my body. Mm-hmm. And here's another story. Should this high schooler have been suspended for her inappropriate dress? Evette Ray, this just happened last week, a senior at Westside High School in Dayton, Ohio, got dressed on Friday morning. She chose an outfit that made her feel good.
Can we just pause for a second?
Yeah.
Are you telling me that one teenager in a high school in Ohio wearing something that was questionable made the news?
Yeah.
This is newsworthy? That alone, I think, is saying something about our culture. That's ridiculous. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, it's in Yahoo.com parenting. But this is so she wore a dress that was too short.
Okay.
Student handbook.
Not the first teenage girl to do that.
The student handbook has some schools have rules.
This is a public high school?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, public high school. Your dress has to go down to the top of your kneecap. That's their rule.
Okay.
Her dress did not go down to the top of her kneecap. So that seems kind of clear.
Okay.
You violated the rule. But she said, I read in 17 that I had to dress for how I felt. If I dressed well...
Does that explain us? You've been reading 17, Phil?
If I dressed well, I would feel better about myself. And I wanted to feel good on my last day.
Well, that backfired, didn't it?
So she refused to change and ended up being suspended on her last day of high school.
Okay.
And now, of course, her parents are outraged.
Yeah.
And that's really what the story is about. So look at that dress.
It actually looks
It's
very modest.
Yeah, it's a modest dress,
Yeah.
but it clearly doesn't come down to the top of her kneecaps.
Well, she should be flogged.
It's just a rule. They had to pick a point. You have to draw a line somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's Mad Max. It's chaos. We're fighting for gasoline in the desert
It's Lord of the Flies.
and keeping women as breeding slaves.
Okay, what?
And we'll talk about that movie once you get around to seeing it.
Okay, here's my question.
Yeah, what's your question?
Why on earth do we not have school uniforms?
Public
Wouldn't that
school
solve-
uniforms?
Yeah, I've actually, when I was
Because
a
it's
high school
sexist.
when I was a high school student, I spent a couple months overseas in New Zealand and Australia, and I actually went to some high schools, attended some high schools where they had uniforms, public
Yeah.
schools, and it just immediately occurred to me that this would solve so many problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like this one. But no, we're America. We have to be individualists, and we have to express our identity by the brands we put on our bodies in high school and make the poor people feel inadequate and the people with disfigured bodies or whatever. But why can't we just do uniforms? Wouldn't that solve so many problems?
Yes, except parents wouldn't like it. Well, some parents would.
I would.
But I mean, think of the cheerleader moms, the musical moms, the moms that are reliving things through their daughters.
Well, they should see a therapist.
Because that's where a lot of the pushback comes from.
know it
It's
is.
like we can afford to make my daughter look beautiful.
Okay.
we're going to make her look beautiful.
Well, then do that at 3:30 when school's out.
Yeah.
I think it's more about an American value of rugged individualism and self-expression.
Do you feel like a
freedom of
rugged
speech.
individual?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm rugged. I ride horses. Okay.
When do you ride horses?
Well, not lately.
Okay.
But I can ride a horse.
You can ride a
I
horse?
can ride a horse.
Could you,
I actually took horseback riding
as a class?
undergraduate in college. Yeah.
Seriously?
We had stables on campus.
You
I
had
used to
campus
go-
stables?
Yeah, I used to go horseback riding.
Left over from the Civil War?
Yeah.
Were they the same horses?
I would saddle my own horse. I'd clean their hooves. I did the whole thing. I was
Get
pretty-
out.
Yeah, I can do that.
So you are ready for a crusade.
Absolutely. Cowboy hat, cigarette. I'm ready to go.
Her last quote is the girl who was suspended for half a day. I love the dress. I have no regrets about wearing
She
it.
said yes to the dress.
I would wear it again any day. I feel good in it, and I think all women need to realize that they should wear what they feel good in. Because ultimately, how we decide our values, does it feel good?
So, if she feels good in no shoes and no shirt, should she still demand service at the Taco Bell?
I feel much more comfortable without pants. You know, it's
Just double checking.
I just don't think we're thinking about what we're saying. Does it?
That's an American pastime.
Does it seem like we're thinking about? Okay.
So this is your crotchety old man on the front
Yeah, this is my
porch,
crotchety old man.
raking a hose.
Well, does the school have the right to set a dress code?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone disputes that. And you have to you have to make some rules. You know, my grandmother, when she went away to college, she and her mother had to sew sleeve extensions onto all of her dresses because at her college, your sleeve had to for a woman had to come down to her elbow. You couldn't expose any upper arm. And too many of her and they didn't have the money to just go buy all new dresses, so they spent time sewing extensions, like hair extensions today.
Well, that was just oppressive.
She didn't complain about it. She just said, yeah, I remember having to do that.
I'm sure back in her day, a woman going to college was sort of an extravagance to begin with.
Yeah, she was a novelty.
Yeah.
What are you? And do you have upper arms that we could sample? Oh, you cad.
Just the men would fall over and swoon if they saw a woman's upper arm.
Oh, you cad. All right, new story. Do you have any stories?
I have lots of stories, but I don't have. You didn't.
Yeah, okay. One factor behind falling share of Americans. We talked about the falling share of Americans who identify as Christian by the last Pew Research. A major demographic study of the country's religious landscape by the Pew Research Center released like a week ago Tuesday or 2 weeks ago Tuesday shows how dramatically the overall number of self-identifying Christians has dropped in 7 years. In 2007, more than 78% of Americans said they practiced some form of Christianity, including consumerism, materialism, and sexism. In today, 70% identify as Christians. Apparently, the lowest figure in U.S. history. I don't know how long they've been taking those.
Who had a really, I think, thoughtful. Well, there are a couple of thoughtful pieces on this.
Yeah.
One was Ross Douthat from the New York Times.
Ross who?
Douthat.
Douthat?
I think that's how you say his name. Douthat.
Wow. Okay.
Douthat, something like that.
Sure.
And Russell Moore from the
Yeah,
Southern
I know
Baptist,
Russell Moore.
But they both basically said the same thing, which is if you look at the numbers carefully, what's happening is people who were nominally Christian, who really didn't engage their faith in any meaningful way. They might go Christmas and Easter. They would call themselves a Christian because they celebrated, Christmas instead of Hanukkah or something like that. That group of nominal Christians, fewer people feel the social pressure to identify themselves as a Christian, and they're fine now saying, I really don't believe anything, or I'm not a churchgoer or whatever. But among those who actually own and adhere to Orthodox Christianity, there's no decline.
Unlike nearly every other Christian group in the U.S., the number of white evangelicals has held relatively steady over the past 7 years. And then, parenthetically, black Protestants have also held relatively steady. So, white evangelicals and black evangelicals, so basically evangelicals, are holding steady.
So you're seeing nominal Christians don't want to call themselves Christians anymore, which is like, okay, fine.
But this article, the theory is... among white evangelicals, 8 out of 10 typically and reliably support the GOP. a consistency not seen in almost any other demographic group this size. Scholars have long identified a backlash to this conservatism in evangelicals and to some extent conservative Catholics. Indeed, many experts argue that the political conflict over culture war issues has spurred an increase in those who have left their religious traditions altogether.
That was a big study done by Campbell and Putnam.
Campbell and Putnam, Soup and the publisher?
Yeah, about 2 years ago. It was published in The Atlantic, and it's actually really interesting research that shows a correlation between young people raised in the church, leaving the faith, a direct correlation between that and the perception of Christianity as a political
right. So it seems that the more Christianity in America becomes identified with right-wing politics, the more people are uncomfortable self-identifying as Christian.
That's right.
So you start to assume that the political identification is inseparable from the religious identification.
I would add to that my assumption. This can't really be researched because it doesn't exist. But if Christianity were to somehow pendulum swing to the opposite side and suddenly it became wholly identified with liberal, progressive, democratic politics,
same thing would
you'd have the same problem.
Right.
So it's when you marry the two in the cultural mindset. And here's the other thing. I don't know what your experience has been. I know some of it because we're at the same church. But in my life in the church, since the time I was a teenager, I haven't heard any politics. I've not been in churches that really emphasize anything political. So what's interesting is
perhaps it's because we're Northerners.
Well, I don't think it's that. I think the majority of evangelical churches in the U.S. and pastors really don't talk about politics. They avoid it. And I've given you plenty of stories of my own experience around the country talking to pastors who I think should sometimes be talking about politics who aren't. But they avoid it like the plague. The problem is most people's perception of popular Christianity is not shaped by what happens in their church. It is shaped by the voices they see on TV, in the media, on the news. So
just like their sense of gender and modesty.
Yes.
It's the television. So that's the problem.
The voices that the media selects to represent Christianity in the public square.
Right.
And we could name them. A lot of them are the crazy uncles that we rant about on this podcast. But that has so shaped the public perception of Christianity that it doesn't matter what the local church is doing or what your pastor's saying.
Right.
You're having your view shaped by what you see in the media. And that has done just incalculable damage to the next generation in the church.
Okay. Speaking of generations of TV, David Letterman just signed off.
Yes, he did.
Did you watch the last show?
Not.
You missed it?
No.
It was worth watching.
I'll catch it on YouTube.
You catch it. Okay. Did he play? What role did he play in your teenage years?
He played a role from time to time, from about 10:30 to 11:30 at night. But it is true. I remember my dad especially loved Johnny Carson.
Yes, my dad loved Johnny Carson.
And I used to stay up sometimes and watch Johnny Carson with him. And it was interesting because originally it was Carson and then the Tonight Show with Letterman afterwards. And it was almost like, well, the old people go to bed now.
Yep. And now things get a little wacky.
Right. They get a little wacky. The kids are up. And so, yeah, you'd stay up and watch that and the stupid pet tricks and all that. So it was a different flavor. But it's interesting now, 20 years ago, whatever it was, when he moved into that after the news slot in our generation age, and now you've got the late guys who are even wackier and all the cable stuff. So do we keep moving down that? Is it like a conveyor belt
of wacky,
of immaturity that just keeps compiling?
Well, Family Guy. I mean, the Adult Swim on the Cartoon Network. Yeah, Key and Peele, Amy Schumer. What's weird? I was watching. I've been watching more TV because I've been building stuff at home. I don't usually watch for GalaxyBuck.net. Go check it out. I've been building stuff in my living room because it's more comfortable than building stuff here in the studio, and I can watch TV while I'm doing it. So I've been dipping my toes more deeply into the pool of popular culture.
That's dangerous.
It is. I've already lost a toe. What was I going to say? Oh, I watched something. What did I watch? What were we talking about?
You were talking about late night, like Key and Peele.
Oh, yeah.
Comedy Central.
Yeah, I was watching and I watched Entertainment Tonight, one of those, entertainment shows, or Access Hollywood or whatever.
TMZ.
Yeah, and I know the hosts are talking about Amy Schumer's first movie. Amy Schumer made a movie.
Okay.
And interviewing her, is it going to be as racy and crude.
Racy
as
is the word. It's raunchy.
as raunchy and crude as you're known for as your stand-up. And she assured them, oh yes, don't worry, it will be. And the hosts, I noticed the hosts aren't in a position where you could even make a moral judgment about any of the content they discuss. That's not even. They're not even in a universe, so they're like, so look out for that one. It's, can't wait for that one. It's going to be raunchy.
Apparently, she's very successful at what she does. Her show's popular, her comedy's popular. So if it were, I mean, they're not in the business of judging it. They're in the business of saying, hey, this is popular.
We've gone, as a culture, we've gone out of the business of discerning anything. Except for whether it's sexist to make my daughter wear a T-shirt to a pool party.
I think.
Ooh, yeah?
Yeah.
Why?
Because we're discerning stuff all the time. We just discern by a different criteria.
What's our new criteria?
Well, it's the same as the old one.
What's the old criteria?
Does it make
Oh,
money?
does it sell?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be offended by a movie just because it didn't do well. They'd just make fun of it.
Did you see John Carter of Mars or whatever that was?
Yeah.
By that?
You were offended?
Yeah. That they spent all that money on a bad movie?
I just watched Jupiter Rising.
I didn't know that one.
$150 million. The Wachowski siblings, because they're not brothers anymore.
Right, because one had a sex change.
Yeah.
Gender
reassignment. Yeah. And it's funny because in the behind-the-scenes stuff, she's the only one who talks.
It's like Penn and Teller?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I don't get it. Anyway, $150 million and lost almost all of it.
Have they had a successful movie since Matrix?
No. Speed Racer? No. No. The rumor is that they're going to have a hard time making another big budget movie, that this was like their last. Kind of like M. Night Shyamalan.
M. Night Shyamalan.
M. Shyamalan. Do.
His big hit with was it The Sixth Sense?
The Sixth Sense. The Sixth Sense, and then the one with what was the one with Mel Gibson and the alien? Signs.
Yeah, but Sixth Sense
was really
his
scary.
Big breakout thing.
Yes.
I was in the theater watching that movie, and I don't know, like 10 minutes into the movie, Amanda, my wife, just leans over to me and goes, "I think he's dead."
Really? 10 minutes in?
Like, really early. And
10 minutes in?
I'm usually the one who gets like what's going on in the story and can predict where it's going. And she nailed it so early, and I'm like, whatever. And then the whole movie, then I'm going with that hypothesis that she put in my head, and it kind of ruined the whole experience.
I bet it did.
But she nailed that one. But then, he kind of got, as a filmmaker, got stuck in the expectation of, there's always going to be a twist.
Right.
There's going to be a twist.
I'm the twisty guy.
He's the twist guy.
I'm the twisty guy.
It doesn't work.
And he fell out, ran out of twists.
That's too bad. There aren't too many Indian directors in Hollywood. Plenty in Bollywood. But.
That's right. There's, I think, ample opportunity for Indian directors.
But
Bollywood.
You ever watched a Bollywood movie?
No.
You need to do that.
Did you see?
I think that's your next derivative project. Forget Star Trek. You need to do
Buck goes Bollywood.
Bollywood
Buck.
You need to do like Buck Delhi.
Buck Delhi.
Instead of Buck Denver. Buck Delhi.
Yeah.
And
he could have a sidekick who's a monkey with an Indian accent. Where could I come up with a character like that?
See, the Galaxy Buck is about like galactic mission.
Yeah.
You could do one set in India that's like about
galactic colonialization.
Well, maybe, or you could do like contemplative Christianity, kind of mystical spirituality. Like he goes to an ashram.
Yeah, he goes to an ashram
looking for
and that's Christian. Why?
Because he comes to the realization that these other forms of mysticism don't ultimately lead to what we're looking for.
So he disproves Hinduism.
Something like that. But you gotta have a musical.
You can't do that anymore. Sure, it's not allowed to disprove other people's belief systems.
Well, you're doing that with Ken Ham and your space mission.
Oh no! Well, that's a cartoon.
I'm gonna do
it's
my
not a cartoon. Okay, what should I sing about? Would you like to wear your swimsuit at the party? Do you think it's really cute? But is it something that you should wear on your birthday suit? Or should you put on a t-shirt and follow the rules? Is your dress just a little bit short? Maybe it's cute, you could take him to court, but the school said the dress needs to be down to the top of your kneecap. And even if 17 Magazine says that's crap, you still need to follow the rules, even if they don't make you feel so cool. And I'm just an old man sitting on my front porch saying, Solomon, get off my lawn before I torch you with this fire hose filled with nitroglycerin, because otherwise it wouldn't torch him. Yeah, but at least you taught me how to say Muslim. And for that, I'm grateful to him. And I hope y'all come back next week. Happy Memorial Day.
See you guys.
Bye.